And joining us next to discuss the current state of the U.S. economy, we have Peter Schiff, Chief Economist and Global Strategist at Euro Pacific Capital. Peter Schiff, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure.
Peter, when it comes to Bidenomics, the Biden administration touting low unemployment and heavy investment in infrastructure, among other things. However, when you talk to many average Americans, they're still feeling the impact from inflation. Help us understand the diversion or the disconnect.
Well, remember, it's government spending. It's not really investment that's going on. And all that government spending is being financed by deficits, and that's really the source of the inflation. And it has been the source of the inflation for many, many years because the Fed has been monetizing all the government debts by creating money, and that's what's been putting all this upward pressure on prices. So it's the government that is responsible for the inflation. And as long as the Biden administration keeps on spending money that it doesn't have, inflation is going to get worse.
Peter, it appears as though the Vice President, Kamala Harris, is aware of the pressure the average American is facing. Let's take a quick listen.
For a plane, train, bus, gas, most Americans are a $400 unexpected expense away from bankruptcy.
What do you make of the Vice President's comment?
Well, you know, that's true. In fact, everybody is bankrupt. You know, the U.S. government is also bankrupt. We just don't want to acknowledge it. But we know we admitted that during the fight over raising the debt ceiling. We said that if we can't raise the debt ceiling, we have to default on what we've already borrowed, which means we're broke. We don't have the resources to pay our bills. All we can go is deeper into debt so that we don't have to pay our bills. So the whole country is broke thanks to all this reckless borrowing and spending that has been made possible by a cooperative and complicit Fed that has kept interest rates artificially low and monetized all that debt. But now that the Fed is forced to allow interest rates to rise, the air is coming out of this bubble, and it's going to be felt, you know, throughout the U.S. economy.
Peter, I want to get your thoughts on China. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo wrapping up her trip from the communist nation, coming out saying, quote, decoupling is neither in our economic or national security goals. What do you make of this approach?
Well, I mean, we can't afford to decouple because you have to recognize that China is both our biggest supplier and our biggest banker. The Chinese loan us the money to buy the stuff that they produce that we can't. And our entire standard of living rests on the support of China. And if we lose that support, it's going to collapse. Now, we're in the process of losing that, whether we want to or not. I think the Chinese realize it's in their interest to drive the decoupling. And that's what's going on. I mean, look at what's happening with the BRIC nations. They had a summit. I mean, they're expanding their numbers. They're looking to de-dollarize and to reduce and eventually eliminate their dependency on the U.S. dollar. And when they no longer need dollars, well, then they no longer need to sell us their stuff because they have plenty of domestic demand for what they produce. And that means the United States is going to be in a lot of trouble because we don't have the industrial capacity to produce what we're now getting from China. And despite what Biden is saying about some kind of manufacturing renaissance, it's all a bunch of BS. The manufacturing sector continues to shrink under his presidency, and our trade deficits have hit record highs.
So, Peter, how do we manage or mitigate the dangers that a more tethered economic relationship with China poses to us?
Well, what we have to do is reduce the burden that the U.S. government places on the American economy and on American industry. So we need to see massive deregulation. We also have to see substantial and across-the-board cuts in government spending so we can relieve the economy of the burden of paying for that spending so that we can start producing again the things that we are now importing from China and other countries, because when the dollar collapses, which I think is inevitable as it loses its status as a reserve currency, we're not going to be able to produce unless we're not going to be able to consume unless we can produce. And right now, our productive capacity is being inhibited by government.
Peter Schiff, really appreciate you joining us.
My pleasure.